Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib says that she will not visit her family in the West Bank. Israel had barred Tlaib and Minnesota Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from the country. Both support a Palestinian-led boycott movement against Israel over its policies in the Palestinian territories. In a statement today, Tlaib said, quote, "Visiting my grandmother under these oppressive conditions meant to humiliate me would break my grandmother's heart." Dan Raviv joins me now from Washington. He's a senior Washington correspondent for I-24 News. So, Dan, what do you make of this back and forth that has been going on with the Congresswomen and the state of Israel?
We rarely see something like this, all within 24 hours, right? Just remember how this story has rolled out. At first, we learned that Israel decided, apparently under pressure from President Trump, not to let the two congresswomen visit Israel. There were a lot of protests. A lot of people think it looked bad for Israel. There were senior Democrats like the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the top Democrat also in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, saying that Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar should have the right to visit Israel. The truth is their trip was planned, as they put it, to Palestine. They would arrive at the airport in Tel Aviv and then just go to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Okay, and then by last night, Israel, in fact, was offering to Rashida Tlaib the okay to visit her grandmother living in the Palestinian West Bank. And Rashida Tlaib, it turns out, had written a letter to Israel's Interior Ministry saying, "I just want to visit my grandmother, and I promise not to engage in any pro-boycott activities." So Israel was going to let her go, and then I guess she thought about it for a few hours and said, "No, you're treating me like a criminal. I'm not going to go, and even my grandmother, who's in her 90s, wouldn't want me to go under these circumstances." And so, again, is it a win for anybody? Trump, Israel, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar? Really hard to sort out, Rena.
You know, both she and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar have supported BDS, which is known as Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement. Why did Israel feel that that was such a threat that they needed to prevent them from entering the country?
A few years ago, the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, even passed a law that said any foreigner who is a supporter of BDS, that boycott movement, won't be allowed into Israel. The Israeli government could make exceptions, of course. And about a month ago, we heard, by the way, they'd make an exception for two members of Congress. The word from the Israeli government was, "We respect the United States. We respect Congress." But in general, Israelis feel that it's really offensive, even anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, for anyone in the world to single out Israel for criticism because of how Israel still holds the West Bank all these years after the 1967 war. Israel just feels it's unfair, so they're trying to push back against the boycott movement. This was really surprising, though. I mean, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu was going to let them visit on their little delegation to Palestine. But President Trump said that they are terrible people who are anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. And Trump said it would be a sign of weakness if Israel lets them visit. So Netanyahu listened to his friend Trump. Maybe it helps Netanyahu in his election campaign, which is, going on right now in Israel, Rena.
Yeah. And, there was a Twitter thread this afternoon where Omar wrote, denying visits to duly elected members of Congress is not consistent with being either an ally or a democracy. What do you think the potential political risk could be when Israel opens itself to banning members of the United States Congress?
Well, there's one thing about worldwide image, but specifically here in the United States, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government already had trouble with Democrats. Republicans are, almost all of them, proud to say they're 100% with Israel. Democrats seem to be divided. They don't really approve of Netanyahu and his right-wing cabinet. They wish that Israel would move more quickly toward peace talks instead of approving settlements, Jewish settlements in the West Bank. And so that's been the problem for Israel, keeping friends in the Democratic Party. And Netanyahu wants to be so friendly with President Trump that really Netanyahu has turned off Democrats. So what if a Democrat is elected president in November of next year? Israel may have trouble with its relationship with the U.S. government as well as the U.S. public.
Yeah, I want to read for you a quote from the New York Times today. It says, and I'm quoting here, "Mr. Trump crossed a line that other presidents have not, in effect exporting his partisan battles beyond the country's borders." What do you think? You talked a little bit about it there, Dan, but the impact this could have on U.S.-Israeli relations going forward.
Well, just that Israel is politicized as an issue. Israel was proud for decades to have bipartisan support in the United States. But increasingly, Netanyahu has been reaching out to Republicans and is turning off Democrats. There really could be an effect. And what the New York Times editorial means is that President Trump obviously wants to use Omar and Tlaib as members of the so-called squad, along with two other women of color in Congress. Trump wants to use them, as he puts it, as the new face of the Democratic Party, claiming they're socialists, they're extreme, they're anti-Jewish, they're anti-Israel. And so Trump will keep saying that, and he wanted Netanyahu to help him. Well, Netanyahu, again, has felt that he's gotten a lot of help from Trump, moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli sovereignty in the Golan Heights, and more. So I think Netanyahu did Trump a favor this week, but in the long run, it could hurt Israel and its relations, certainly with Democrats, but more broadly in the United States.
And we'll also be watching Israeli elections come September. Dan, Raviv, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.